Good evening. We'll call the regular Committee on Infrastructure to order on Wednesday, November 22nd, 2017 at 7 o'clock p.m. in the Aldermanic Chamber. Would the clerk be so kind as to call the roll?
Mr. Chairman, Alderman Mark S. Cookson.
Present.
Alderman David Shoneman.
Here.
Alderman Tom Lopez, although we think he may arrive late. Alderman Sean McGinnis, I am here. And Alderman Richard A. Dowd.
Present.
Also in presence is Alderman June Karen.
Thank you very much. Public comment this evening? Seeing none. Communications?
There are none.
Unfinished business?
There is none.
New business resolutions?
There are none.
New business ordinances?
Ordinance number 17047, establishing a handicap parking space in front of the 15 Merrill Street.
Very good. Is there a motion? Alderman Shoneman.
Make a motion to recommend final passage of 01747.
The motion by Alderman Shoneman is to recommend final passage of ordinance 17047. Discussion. Alderman Karen?
Thank you. I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. I received a phone call from the gentleman that lives at 15 Merrill Street. His wife is handicapped, and they have a hard time parking in front of their house for her to exit and be able to climb the one stair to get to her doorway. They've been having issues with one of the apartment buildings in that area, and parking enforcement has been down there, and they finally suggested that they call to see if we could get a handicap parking space. So I did contact BPW, and they sent Mr. Husband out to see if it was something feasible, and it's similar to the Balcom Street handicap section we put in, and so I am requesting that we approve this for the neighbor.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
Hey, Tom.
Thank you, Alderman Karen.
Tom is
For the record, Alderman Lopez has arrived at 7:02 p.m. Good evening, Alderman Lopez.
Good evening.
We are just on the first piece of legislation, ordinance 1747, establishing a handicap parking space in front of 15 Merrill Street.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any additional discussion? Alderman Shoneman.
Mr. Chairman, I support this legislation. I think this is good to do for folks who have a need. The only thing we have to be careful about, and has occurred in Ward 3 a couple times, when we put up signs like this, sometimes the person moves or no longer needs the handicap sign, and they stay there. And so it takes legislation to take them down again.
Correct.
So anytime we do this kind of thing, I fully support it. We just have to keep in the back of our minds that we have to keep an eye on it, and when it's no longer needed, then we have to put legislation through to pull it. It's well worth doing all that effort to solve these kinds of problems. It's just a reminder.
Very good. Thank you. Alderman Lopez.
I don't know if this is a question for legal, but is it possible to just, amend the legislation to say for such time as an individual is living in a space that is handicapped? So that if they move, then it has a self-removing factor?
We still have to,
Yeah, it's,
we still have to
remove
be
it?
aware of that, so,
Oh, yeah, okay. There has to be some city oversight.
correct. Alderman Dowd.
I think when we discussed this before, it was, we don't design these handicap spots for individuals.
Correct.
We're putting it in this place to be a benefit to that person, but it's not for that individual. Any handicapped person can park there, so I think we still have to do legislation to take it down afterwards.
You would be correct. Alderman Shoneman.
That's absolutely true. It's not reserved for a particular person, but anytime we do it, it takes away other parking because it means that only a handicapped person can park there. And if that need goes away, then it's just something we should look at. In Ward 3, there are a couple on Mount Pleasant Street, for instance, which is near the school, and those are no longer needed, and we have to legislate taking them down.
Correct.
Just something to be aware of.
So now that parking enforcement is it under the purview of economic development yet? January 1st. So when parking enforcement comes under the purview of economic development, and as we're continuing to look at these downtown parking spaces, and I'm assuming that even though this isn't necessarily what you might consider downtown, I would say that we should probably keep an inventory or a record of the handicap spots that we legislate, and then periodically go back and review whether it's still a necessity for that area or that particular spot. So, again, we're just adding to the laundry list of our Economic Development Office. All right. Any additional discussion for ordinance 1747? Again, it is not for the residents at 15 Merrill Street, but they can certainly take advantage of the handicap spot, which happens to be right in front of their home. Alderman Karen.
We have to remember that they have to have handicap plates in order to utilize that. That seems to be
That is
a
correct.
question as well. So, and I agree that we do try to do this periodically, and, but I agree with Alderman Schoeneman, because I do know that the handicap spot on Balcom Street, the person does no longer live there, so that's something to check. And that'd give something for economic development to, to do in their spare time.
In the spare time.
Yes, thank you.
Alderman Lopez.
I mean, not to speak for economic development, but if they're in the process of, or the practice of checking parking adherence anyway, they probably would be the most likely people to notice if it's constantly empty. And if it's not, then someone's using it, so it's helpful.
No disagreement with your statement. Very good. All right. The motion by Alderman Schoeneman is to recommend final passage of 1747. And seeing that nobody wants to table it for later in the meeting, so
Excuse me.
all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And we will recommend final passage of ordinance 1747 at the next Board of Aldermen meeting.
Thank you, gentlemen.
You're
Happy
most welcome.
Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving to you. Have a wonderful evening.
Additional ordinances. O-17, O-48, authorizing stop signs on Beeson Street at its intersections with Berkeley and Raymond Streets.
Is there a motion? Alderman Schoeneman.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to recommend final passage of 017-048, and I'd like to speak on that too, please.
The floor is yours, Alderman Schoeneman.
Thank you very much. Beeson Street is one of the streets that runs to the east of Concord Street. And it's a residential street, but these residential streets are increasingly used as cut-throughs. And what happens when a street becomes used as a cut-through, drivers tend to go a little faster. They're in a hurry. They're not looking to pull into a driveway somewhere. They're just cutting through. And this is not a heavily trafficked street yet for that purpose, but there have been a couple of issues there. One was our resident at the corner, who lives at the corner of Berkeley and Beeson, had a grandson visiting. A grandson was riding a bicycle and was hit by a car at that intersection. Fortunately, no injury, but they're the folks who brought it to my attention, and I think we need to address that. In conversations with other people in the area about Beeson Street, and particularly that intersection, it turned out there was another issue at Raymond Street. Raymond Street is essentially at the top of a hill, and Beeson continues downhill, and it's a very abrupt drop-off. So it's abrupt coming up, and it's abrupt going down, and what happens if you're going a little faster than you should, or not really slowing down to a speed below 25, what happens is you approach that and you're actually cresting the hill and heading down, or cresting the hill heading up, before you can really see if anyone's in the intersection. And there was at least one near miss at that intersection as well. So legislation here is to create a four-way stop, because in both cases, on Raymond Street and Berkeley Street, there's already stops on those cross streets, but Beeson is the one that people are making quick pass-through. And so this would make each of those intersections a four-way stop for the purpose of safety. I will note that the legislation says on it, the legal note from our legal department, that we're supposed to get, we have to comply with those state warrants for stop signs. And we don't, my understanding is that strictly speaking, we don't have to comply. In fact, the reason this legislation has come up now is because I was in a meeting in the mayor's office with Director Photo, Director of Public Works, and Mr. Dukran, city engineer, Mr. Husband, who's the traffic engineer for the city, the mayor, and Ms. Kleiner, and we were talking about a number of issues. And while we had all those folks there, I asked again about this issue, what are we going to do about these stop signs? Because this has been percolating for a while. And I was told by Mr. Dukran that these stop signs probably don't comply with the warrants. I'll accept that as fact. Let's say they don't comply with the warrants. What he told me, though, and if I'm not mistaken, and if he sees this and wants to change what I'm saying, that's perfectly fine. But we don't need to, strictly speaking, comply with the warrants. We just need to acknowledge that the warrants say what they do, but the Board of Aldermen still decides stop sign. This is the city of Nashua, and the Board of Aldermen, not the state, decides stop signs. So while we don't have a written opinion to that effect, I will concede that these stop signs don't comply with the warrants. And if we were to get a written opinion, it would not say that they do. It would say that they don't. So my feeling is we have as much knowledge as we're ever going to have about whether these stop signs are appropriate or not. And I think that for safety reasons, especially since there was at least one child hit by a car on a bicycle at one of these intersections, that we should proceed.
I will just add, Alderman Shoneman, I would make the statement that because we don't have a warrant analysis in front of us, I would suggest that the wording would be that these stop signs may not comply with the requirements of a warrant analysis versus that they don't.
That sounds
Just
fine.
because we don't
don't-
know.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you. Didn't mean to interrupt.
Any additional discussion? All right, again, the motion by Alderman Shoneman is to recommend final passage of ordinance 1748, authorizing stop signs on Beeson Street at its intersection with Berkeley and Raymond Streets. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And that will be recommended for final passage at the next, or hopefully at the next board, or one of the future Board of Aldermen meetings, if not the next one.
Thank you.
Additional new business, Mr. Chairman. Ordinance 17049, removing the parking meters and establishing a 2-hour parking time limit on Cottage Street. Alderman Lopez.
Alderman Lopez.
I would just like to recommend final passage. We've discussed this at length on this committee to date, and this and another 2 ordinances are specifically on the recommendation of the Planning and Economic Development Office.
Office of Economic Development?
That one, yes.
That one, okay. Very good. So the motion by Alderman Lopez is to recommend final passage of ordinance 1749. Any discussion? So we are removing parking meters and then establishing a 2-hour parking time limit on Cottage Street. Alderman Lopez, you may either have this answer, or we may refer to Office of Economic Development for some additional information. Would this be categorized as Zone 3 within the downtown parking area?
I don't have that answer. I wish I did, but Director Cummings might.
So I'm getting an affirmative response from Director Cummings' Office of Economic Development that it would be designated as Zone 3 within the parking area. It is currently, and it will no longer be Zone 3. It will just be designated as a 2-hour parking limit in that area, in which after January 1st, parking enforcement, which will be part of the Office of Economic Development, will be monitoring that for enforcement. Very good. All right. Answered my questions. Thank you for those hand signals and such. All right. Any additional discussion on ordinance 1749? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. and we will recommend that for final passage.
Additional ordinances. Ordinance 17050, establishing a 2-hour parking time limit on Quincy Street.
Is there a motion? Alderman Lopez.
I'd like to move to recommend final passage.
The motion by Alderman Lopez is to recommend final passage of ordinance 1750. Discussion? Alderman Lopez, anything?
It's still part of the same recommendation package.
Part of the same recommendation package. No additional discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And that will be recommended for final passage.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, ordinance 17051, adding additional streets to the overnight on-street parking program temporarily.
Is there a motion? Alderman Lopez.
I'd like to recommend final passage and make some comments.
The recommendation by Alderman Lopez is for final passage of ordinance 1751. The floor is yours, Alderman Lopez.
So first, I want to express appreciation to my fellow aldermen for meeting tonight for this, because it is the week of Thanksgiving. I'm sure a lot of people would like to start meeting with their families early, but this is something that has, impacted a lot of families, specifically in the Tree Streets area, and will continue to do so. So I think us moving quickly on this with some alacrity is definitely very much appreciated by them. It is the culmination of this committee's work over the summer let me give credit where it's really due. With the Office of Economic Development, providing all of the guidance, all of the street assessment, and presenting to us regularly so that we could give feedback. So it's the end result of a lot of work, a lot of research, and a lot of speaking to people living in those neighborhoods. So I think it's been well researched and well vetted.
So Alderman Lopez, I don't have the streets in front of me because I'm just working off of an agenda. Can you identify the streets that are part of this of on-street parking program temporarily?
I know they include Fairmont, Belmont, Ash Street, those streets that were presented to us in our previous meeting. I may actually have the presentation
Alderman
right here.
Schoeneman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have the list here on the legislation if you'd like me to go over it.
That'd be great, thank you.
Okay. Ash Street, the east side from Kinsley Street to Lake Street. Auburn Street, north side between Charles Street and Locust Street. Belmont Street, the south side. Charles Street, east side from Auburn Street to Fairmount Street. Chestnut Street, the east side from Kinsley Street to Lake Street. Fairmount Street, the east side from Amherst Street to Charles Street. And Franklin Street, south side from Front Street to Locust Street.
Thank you.
And I will just note that parking will be permitted on these streets if this passes through December 31st, 2018.
So this temporary is a year-long temporary?
Yes.
All right, additional discussion? Alderman Schoeneman?
Yeah, thanks. I just want to echo what Alderman Lopez said about not only the tree streets, but what's happened in French Hill, too. I think that all these neighborhoods are difficult to park. And streets are narrow and not a lot of driveway space, and increasingly, families have more and more cars. So this is a benefit. It's a benefit to the tenants, it's a benefit to the landlord, it's a benefit to the city overall, because we're getting more people in town who have cars. And I think that's perfectly fine. This list is kind of interesting. It's alphabetical, so we're jumping from French Hill to the Tree Streets to French Hill to Tree Streets, and it may sound like it's not organized, but it is organized alphabetically. So thanks to all who did the work, and I think the folks in Ward 3 in this area are going to be happy, as they are in the Tree Streets as well.
Director Cummings, would you care to join us at this point in time?
Yes, please,
Thank
thank you.
you. Alderman Lopez, do you have?
I just wanted to point out that it speaks to unity because it combines needs from Ward 3 and Ward 4, which is why both of us think it's very important.
Thank you, Alderman Lopez. Director Cummings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and through you to the committee. I do have one request of the committee this evening, which is an amendment. I was able to ascertain the specific number of parking spaces as outlined that we would be adopting. That plan came through engineering late yesterday afternoon. The number of street parking spaces we'd be adding is 138. So I'd be comfortable recommending anything from 138 to 150, just to keep things as a round number. If we could add it up to 150. In the first paragraph of the legislation, which it currently reads, I believe, to be capped out at 400. That would bring this project to fruition.
So where it says 400, do we want to replace that with 550?
550.
Is there somebody that's interested in making that motion to amend the number 400 to 550? Alderman Shoneman?
Make a motion to amend the number 400 to 550 in paragraph A, subparagraph 1.
Everybody's heard the motion. Discussion on it? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. So ordinance 1751 has been amended to include 550 as the number of permits. Alderman Dowd.
Just one quick question. Are we intending to line these? Because we're getting awfully close to when the paint doesn't adhere to the street.
Director Cummings?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That point is very well taken. Yesterday afternoon, anticipation of this conversation and hopefully with this ordinance passing, I've been working with the parking operations foreman to develop a schedule where it will be executed in the next couple of weeks to ensure that we do it in time. We need to, we anticipate a couple 50-degree weather days over the next couple of weeks, and that's when we'll be doing it.
All right. So I had received an email from Director Cummings, I believe it was this afternoon at 1:24. Do you have a copy of that by chance that
plan?
we can include in the minutes?
Sure, I have one copy.
That's fine.
Yep.
And we can make any additional copies as necessary. For the committee's information, Fairmont Street, the south side was going to be fitted with 15 stalls. Charles Street, the west side with 11 stalls. Auburn Street, the north side with 11 stalls. And Franklin Street, the south side with 20 stalls. In the Tree Streets area, Ash Street was going to have 37 stalls on the east side of the street. Chestnut Street was going to have 34. Belmont was going to have 10. Again, that total number is 138. And we were going to increase the number by 150 so that there would be extra permits and that they could be provided by the city clerk's office for those individuals who would like to take advantage of the overnight permit parking program that we have. The French Hill area, I will take special note of. In the last meeting that we had, our audience was full of residents from that area. And based on the number of spaces and the location of those spaces, whether it be on one side of the street or the other, it seems to be that you've taken special note of those concerns that the residents raised at our last meeting. For example, on Auburn Street, you're on the north side of the street, so that when we come down Highland, we're not going to careen into any vehicles during slippery road conditions. So I appreciate that. Thank you for taking special note of that and taking special note of the needs of the residents in that particular area. This work is evident of your listening. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any additional discussion on ordinance 1751 as amended? Alderman McGinnis.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would you vote on the amendment?
We voted, so we voted on to amend.
And that was a
now-
pass. We passed that.
That is correct. And so now we will make the motion for final passage of ordinance 1751 as amended. Any additional discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And ordinance 1751 as amended will be forwarded on to the full board. Ordinance, anything else?
Nope, thank you.
All right, thank you, Director Cummings. Ordinance 1752.
New business ordinance 1752, authorizing free holiday parking at meters in Zone 3, which includes the Elm Street and High Street parking garages from December 10th, 2017 through January 1, 2018.
Is there a motion? Alderman Lopez.
I'd like to recommend final passage, or make a motion to do so.
The motion by Alderman Lopez is to recommend final passage of ordinance 1752. Discussion? The only question that I had was, I was looking at a calendar earlier, and I'm not sure what the holiday schedule is for businesses per se. There's usually a lull between Christmas, New Year's, and then like the week after New Year's. So I didn't know if people might be enticed to come downtown that first week of January, anywhere between the 1st through the 5th. So I didn't know if we wanted to extend it beyond the 1st of January, so that if people were taking that week off and coming back to work beginning on the 8th of January, that we might be able to provide them, again, some benefit by having this zone open to them during that time. But I would ask the committee to chime in on that. Alderman Lopez.
I would definitely be supportive of that because I've observed a lull. It seems like after the holidays, people kind of just stay home for a little while. And I think the businesses downtown can use any break they can get. And I also think that the residents who have been celebrating the holidays and maybe spending a little bit more and buying presents and all might appreciate a little bit more of a break. This is intended to be both a booster and an incentive to come downtown, but also kind of a thank you to the Nashua taxpayers, which I would be happy to extend.
Alderman Shoneman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you recall what we did in this last year, by any chance?
Last year was through January 3rd, I think. January 1st was a Sunday. We let them, we allowed them to park on the 2nd and 3rd, and then the parking went back into effect, I believe it was on the 4th.
So there's some precedent for extending it a little bit. I'm indifferent on it, and if we want to do it till that Friday, I think.
So
I
if that
will
Friday would
agree.
be the 5th.
That Friday would be the 5th. I do agree that I think saving money on parking is an incentive to come downtown. And if that's what we'd like to do, I think it's a great idea.
So right now, the fiscal note says that from January 10th, December 10th through January 1st, there's about a $4,500 expected loss of revenue during that time period. I'm not sure we would expect much more than that for an additional 3 or 4 or 5 days. So, Alderman Dowd.
It'd also be a good time for people to go down and do exchanges that they might want to do.
That's exactly right. Any additional discussion? Is there a motion? Do we want to extend it through Friday the 5th? Alderman Lopez.
Can I make a motion to extend to amend the ordinance as presented to extend through January 5th?
The motion by Alderman Lopez is to amend ordinance 1752 by changing January 1st, 2018 to January 5th, 2018. Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And we have ordinance 1752 amended to be January 5th. Any additional discussion on the motion as amended? On the ordinance as amended? All right, no additional discussion. All those in favor of ordinance 1752 as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And we will recommend final passage of ordinance 1752 as amended. Tabled in committee. Any need to take anything from the table this evening? General discussion? Public comment? Remarks by Alderman? Alderman Lopez?
Just one. I'm sure everybody, I just wanted to extend a happy Thanksgiving to everybody who will be celebrating it over the next few days. And then also, this Saturday, I'm sure everybody's aware that the holiday stroll will be taking place in the evening downtown. But before the holiday stroll, starting at, I believe, noon, at YMCA, there's a fundraiser to help people in Puerto Rico. And, I mean, this is the infrastructure committee. Their infrastructure has been run over by hurricane. So I thought it would be appropriate to make an announcement. And also to comment that the entire fundraising event is organized by an 18-year-old young man, Kevin Janeo. And I'm impressed by his leadership, and I just wanted to call attention to it because we can use more people who see something that needs to be done and are able to find a way to make it feasibly done. He's not just starting a GoFundMe. He's not just, passing a hat around, which are perfectly fine ways of organizing, but he's connected with larger nonprofits. He's made sure that they're able to collect donations that will be delivered on-site locally. He's even gone so far as to make sure there's access to shipping containers. So I've been very impressed with it, and I hope everybody will support him.
Thank you, Alderman Lopez. Alderman Shoneman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. I think that Thanksgiving's my favorite holiday. I think that it's tends to be quieter. It tends to be less commercialized. It tends to be a time that's a little more contemplative. And indeed, there is a lot to be thankful for. These last few days, and maybe other folks too, like me, have been thinking about things they have to be thankful for. We've got home and family. We have a little baby at home. And all these things are great. And I have to say that, honestly, there's nothing that I have not been given. And so thanks is due for every single thing that I have. And I think with any reflection, everyone else would hopefully realize the same. This is a chance to be thankful to our Creator, to be thankful to our family and friends, to be thankful to our neighbors, to everybody, because there's truly nothing that I have not been given. So it's a great holiday, and I wish everybody a very, very happy Thanksgiving. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Shoneman. Alderman Dowd?
Yeah, I too would like to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving, and it's the start of the holiday season, and there's a lot more people in town, families, and I just ask people to slow down, drive the speed limit. I've seen too many people speeding, and we don't need any fatalities over the holiday season, so please slow down.
Thank you, Alderman Dowd. Alderman McGinnis, any?
Oh, happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
And I would wish you all a blessed Thanksgiving as well. No need to go into non-public this evening. Is there a motion? Alderman Dowd.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion by Alderman Dowd is to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. We are adjourned at 7:33 PM.